It is live.
Hey guys, my name is Andrew Perlot, and today I am talking about two paths to freedom. So this is one of those lifestyle talks, and the reason I'm bringing this up and kind of making it the focus of a talk is because I've made my living for the past 6 years or so by being self-employed. And I quit my job as a newspaper reporter in 2010, a job I actually really enjoyed in order to do it. And it's something I don't regret, and I really love the freedom I've generated, even though it has sometimes been more work or, certainly involving more uncertainty. So we're gonna talk about two different ways that you can potentially basically give a big old FU to the man and decide, hey, I'm going to go my own way. I want freedom and I'm willing to work for it. And we're going to talk about the commonality between these two approaches, which is minimalism. So I'm going to talk for a little while about these two different approaches, and then I will take questions from you guys. So just so you know, though, I'm going to be pasting a link into the talk box right to the right, and this has some resources which a lot of you guys are going to be interested in, because we cannot possibly cover all of the details for either of these two approaches which you would need for implementation. So my notes kind of go over more in depth about what I'm talking about and provide you some more links to explore these topics on your own. Let's see. I might have put an extra slash in there. How about that? Yeah. Okay, so why is minimalism the common approach for both of these approaches? And by the way, I'm not saying that there couldn't be more approaches. You know, there's trust fund babies, there's lottery winners, but for the average person, there's really only two ways to escape lifelong or almost lifelong or significant portion of lifelong slavery to a job which they don't enjoy. If you're the type of person that absolutely loves your job, or you have no desire to trade the certainty of your position to something that could potentially be more satisfying but which would cause disruption in your life, that's totally cool, but this talk is probably not going to be very satisfying for you. But how is minimalism kind of playing in here? Well, there's these two approaches, and one is you are going to invest and live off the interest, and you're going to retire essentially, or in other words, reach financial independence. If retirement seems like an awkward word, if you're going to be doing this earlier in life, you're going to be reaching financial independence through your investments. The other one is to start a job which does not just give you independence from a boss, because that may end up saddling you with more responsibilities and more time commitment than you have at your current job. It may actually end up being a worse decision. So we're talking about freedom-oriented jobs that perhaps you can do from anywhere in the world, or if not anywhere in the world, that meet your own criteria for independence and freedom. And that's going to vary dramatically from person to person. Different people are going to care differently about this topic than others. So minimalism comes into play for both of them, because if we're talking about living off investment income, financial independence, then we're talking about before you can reach that, you need to invest your money. That money needs to grow. So how quickly you can achieve financial independence is going to depend on, one, how much you earn. That's going to play a big role in how much you can save. And the other one is, how little do you need to live happily? And that is an entirely personal exploration, which I've really delved into and kind of enjoyed exploring over the years. I have lived without a car for almost 4 years. I have a car now, but I did go 4 years without a car and found it quite satisfactory to get around by bike. And I've adjusted my life to live in places where that was possible, because obviously if I lived in a suburban area, that clearly would not work. And I have no children, and I currently don't have plans to crank out any babies. And, if I felt differently about that, then I would have to, have a different income stream I would have to put more effort into earning more money to support potential children, or whatever other liabilities or needs, things that you support in life. It's all going to differ. For instance, you may decide that you love your phone so much you can't go without it. I currently have a really cheap phone plan, but I went for like 5 years without a phone, and everyone was like, how do you do that? And I was just like, you people lived without phones for a long time. You can still live without phones. And like, my friends are paying like $80 a month, $100 a month. And I was just like, not important to me. So again, these are all decisions, but the more that you can do without, the less you can live with, the less, if you can get by with a bike instead of a car, or a cheap car instead of a expensive car, or a gas efficient car instead of a clunker that burns through tons of gas. These are all factors that are going to affect whether or not you can gain independence. And that also works if you're going with your own job route, because in order for something to be successful from a job perspective, you need to pull in enough money to cover your expenses. And so the lower your expenses are, the more minimalist you are, the more unattached to things you are, and places you'll be able to more easily reach those levels, and through a wider variety of means. So let's start off by talking about the first method that I mentioned, and that is financial independence early in life, not waiting until you're 65 in order to retire. So if you look at my notes that I gave you, there's a couple books I recommend on this topic, but here's the basic idea. So how much money do you need to have in the bank in order to retire? That depends on how much money you need, the minimum amount you can live off of every year that will be spit out as interest. So it also is really critical that if you're going to become financially independent, you should use a withdrawal rate and investments that are going to survive for the long run. And so how do we determine what that is? Well, professors have done the work for us, essentially. And the Trinity study, it originally covered 30-year periods between 1926 and 1995 of retirement to see if any given portfolio withdrawal rate would survive for that time. And they actually expanded that through 2009, a few years ago. So this is a huge span of time. We're talking about like 84 years through a wide variety of economic environments, through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the oil embargo, and the inflation periods in the 70s, the boom periods in the 80s, and going up into our most recent crisis. And looking at those 30-year periods and saying, when did people's investments survive through 30 years of retirement? And the answer is really interesting. They assumed that person used, one, index funds, which are very low cost and give you a representation of the entire stock market, and give you international and domestic coverage, and 50% bonds. And what they found is that at 3% withdrawal rate, you more or less were never going to have your portfolio fail. There would always be money. It's never going to dry up because of, lack of because the economy crashed or something. So yes, we never, just because the last 80-something years performed that way, we don't know necessarily that the future will, but it's a pretty good indication that it will survive. So 3% is more or less you're automatically good forever. 4%, and you have a 96% chance of having whatever investments you've made survive forever, and or at least for a 30-year span of time. So 4% chance of running out. Now, personally, I think that the 4% withdrawal rate is totally reasonable. I think even a 5% withdrawal rate is totally reasonable. So we get back to that question of how much money do you need to live on? So let's say you decide that the minimum amount of money that you can live on is $25,000 a year. So at 4% withdrawal rate, you need $625,000 invested in this half bonds, half index funds that I was talking about. Or at 5% withdrawal, you would only need $500,000. So a significant amount less if you're willing to withdraw more and increase your risk slightly. And generally they found that if you were withdrawing more than 77% per turn, you're pretty much guaranteed to run out of money. But there's a safe, depending on what year you're talking about, there's a safe withdrawal rate somewhere between 3 and 6%. And you would have to customize that, but 4% is a pretty good one to aim for. Now, if you are an extreme minimalist, there's actually some of the studies that, or some of one of the books and a website I talked about is Early Retirement Extreme. And these people are living off of just $8,000 as an example. People living off very small amounts of money because they're choosing to tailor their life to do it that way. Now, you may find that ridiculous, but it's somebody's idea of paradise to be able to live free and only need $200,000 in the bank, which is all you need if you're withdrawing 4% per year, or $160,000 if you're withdrawing 5% a year. And so how do you actually do this? Well, again, the notes I give you more ideas, but basically you need to start living on less than you earn and putting a lot of money in investments, in index funds, very low cost, low fee index funds that will grow very rapidly and get you to your target. And so you've got some options. One is you can do something to earn more money if you're currently earning a very small amount of money, or you can just stay where you're earning and just cut way back, and that will accelerate your ability to invest. So these are basic concepts, not going to blow anyone's mind, but I did include a list of 50 jobs that pay $50,000 or more per year that don't require a college education. If you're considering like, oh, well, I just don't earn enough to save to have, $160,000 in the bank. But most people, if they're right out of college, they're in their early 20s, by the time they're in their early 30s, they can probably have saved enough money to be financially independent. And that's a long span of time to be free. You've got your whole life in front of you. So you have to decide if that is important enough, your freedom is important enough to you to change your lifestyle that much. The second option is doing more what I've done, which is choosing a business that, again, still using minimalism to reduce your expenses, but choosing a business which is going to allow you to have freedom. So why do I love how I live? A lot of my business is passive. I do work hard because I enjoy it, but I have total freedom if I want to take off on a random day of the week and spend a day hiking, or just take a week or two off because I'm burnt out. That's totally cool. I have no bosses to tell me otherwise. When I was a newspaper reporter, I really liked my work, but honestly, I just don't like being told what to do and when to do it. So I really appreciate that, and that's worth a ton to me. The way that I make my money is I sell my books. I've written a number of books on raw foods. I've written a few unrelated books that I sell. I've even written a little work of fiction that I sell. I do some coaching, which brings in some income. I also do ad revenue from things like YouTube and other ads. So this is how I've made it work. There are tons of models. You could be selling a product, while you're vacationing in Europe and, selling those all over the world, because that's how the job market has evolved. If you know how to set it up, you can very often do things remotely. I also give a link to Site Build It in those notes, which is a program that I actually used to build my business initially, because it's not only a hosting site for your website, but it's also very focused on building a business and making it sustainable using search engines to generate traffic for yourself. So I would highly suggest that you maybe consider that if you're completely stumped and just wondering, like, how can I how can I actually build one of these businesses? Site Build It is a really good option because it walks you through how it's not just a web host, it's a business building platform. So I really like that idea. It really helped me get started. And, you know, I've diversified over the years. YouTube is now a regular part of what I do. I have a large email list with people that have subscribed and want to hear what I have to say. So all of these are methods. I also have explored the idea of donation-based support because ideally I'd like to give away more of what I do rather than charging for it. And to do that, I need people to, you know, donate to support me. So I'm kind of playing around with that model, and I've had a little bit of success with it, but not nearly enough for me to actually make the shift as of yet, but kind of something I'm exploring. So if you hate the idea of charging people money, you can, you know, that's a possibility. Let's see. I think that I am going to open it up. Can you type that website in here? Can you just click on the Google Docs? Can anyone tell me if that Google Docs opens up and you can just click on the links? Can anyone just tell me? It opens for me. Yes, it does. Brian, does it open for you? Okay, I'm not seeing her. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So Site Build It is, the link is in there. All right. So I am, okay, lots of people saying it's working. Great. So I'm going to open up the talk to questions because I could go into tons of detail on both of these, and no matter what I say, I'm not going to cover all of them as well as would be necessary to actually implement them. But I have a feeling that you guys have specific questions that you want to ask me about how I've made this work, maybe how it's affected my life, more specifics on either one, and I'm happy to answer those questions. So if you want to just type in, you can hit the ask a question or suggest a topic button, or you can type it in the text box where I just saw a bunch of you guys writing in there. Or maybe we have no questions, so I can just sing to you, or all right, I guess we have no questions. Well, I am open to talking about veganism and raw food topics. That was the focus of my last talk, and we got a large number of questions from that. So maybe financial independence isn't something that really interests you guys. Do you need to have established credit to do any of the things you talk about? No, you don't really. You can, I certainly never took out a loan or anything. I've got credit cards, but, you know, none that I've taken any significant amount out. I've always saved enough money and run my business off savings. So I've never needed credit. If you were going to like open a storefront or something along those lines, and that was your passion, then certainly you may need better credit to do that. But the wonderful thing about running your own business online is that it's very cheap to get going. You can, you know, especially if you can teach yourself to use WordPress or HTML, you can get a website going and start using it. You can set up YouTube. So, you know, beyond whatever equipment you need and whatever hosting fees, which are relatively modest, you don't really need credit. You can just do it off whatever savings. So many people talk about starting a business for under $100. There's a book by a guy who you know, says the $100 startup or whatever, because it really doesn't take a lot of money. Right now, I teach guitar to autistic children for a living. I kind of like this job, but I want to travel and have a job that I can work from home. I really love guitar and teaching it. What do you suggest I do? So I don't know enough about you and how exactly you would be ideal for you to live your life, but there's different options that people I've met. So I've met people who do coach guitar or instrument teaching actually entirely through Skype or other video conferencing, and they've actually been able to make it work that way. You could start a website if you like to write, talking about maybe different types of guitars, and you could write books about how to learn guitar. There's 1.5 million options if you actually start to think about what skill do I have and how would people pay or support me to talk about it. It may be a podcast where you talk about that kind of thing and bring on people and interview them. It may be the book writing or running a program that has videos from your website that you can then sell to people to make that work. But yeah, the options are almost limitless. Or you may decide, you know, guitar isn't the best market and you want to try something else. So many options. Okay. Sure. So tell me, guys, you know, what is, as a vegan, what are some of the big questions you have? Or as a raw foodist, I've been eating a raw food diet for many years. Do you have any questions for me along those lines? Like, how do you make veganism work? How do you make a raw food diet work? Okay. Okay, Kat Lopez. I just became vegan at the start of this summit event. Any tips for keeping it going? Okay, well, you know, I think that having reasons for why you're doing what you're doing is really important. So for me, I had a major medical issue. I had colitis and intestinal disease, and that's what got me, not only because a cooked vegan diet had actually failed to help me, and a raw vegan diet really made the difference and allowed me to get rid of my colitis. So for me, when people are like, why are you still vegan after 13 years? I'm like, well, my health is clearly the issue here. It's the only way I found to not suffer horribly. Now, most people probably do not have a reason that strong because most people don't have significant health issues of that kind, but you probably do have some reason. So for instance, it may be that you love animals, you don't want to hurt them, you don't want to see them suffer. And kind of writing them down and reminding yourself of them periodically is a really fantastic thing to do. It may be that you like the environmental impact. If you care about this world and you want to pass down a decent world for whoever comes after us, whether or not you have children, then veganism is kind of the non-selfish thing to do. For me, health plays a huge part. I'm very athletically active. I'm really into partner acrobatics, acro yoga. I'm really into just being physically active and living physically in this world. And so to me, veganism, and specifically a fruit-based vegan diet, really fuels me in a way that I've just never found anywhere else. So for me, there's just an athletic advantage that I really appreciate. So if you kind of think about it along these lines, the three big ones: morality, environmentalism, which you could also see is connected to morality, and finally health, and the subsets of that, like athleticism. You might just find that that if you remind yourself of those things regularly, you're going to do a better job staying on track. Now, in terms of practical implication, like practical implementation and how to stay on track, if you have questions about cravings or something like that, you can ask me below and I'll address those. I was called disgusting and brainwashed for being vegan. How do I talk to people like that? Well, like I said, I've been vegan for 13 years. And it's interesting, I've never really had anyone, other than some friends, where it was understood that we were kind of going, haha, we're joking about this vegan thing. But I've never had anyone actually try to insult me or belittle my choice. And generally, I've gotten a good deal of respect for it. And that is because I think I'm highly informed about these topics. And I don't mean that I'm going to point out to people why they're horrible people because they're making the decisions they're making, but rather that I can talk at length about the reasons, the health implications of why eating the way that they're eating, if they so desire to hear those things, is not a smart idea. And if they challenge me, I can cite studies. And granted, this is my profession, knowing this information, but educating yourself in that way and being able to talk intelligently about your choices and respectfully to other people, it's pretty hard to think someone is disgusting or brainwashed when they're being logical and, you know, of sound mind. And I don't really understand the disgusting claim. I find eating corpses to be kind of more disgusting than veganism. I don't really understand that claim, so I can't really rebut it. But yeah, there's I think being prepared and being able to, you know, having some talking points prepared, you know, a response to that kind of thing might help. As a minimalist, what kind of equipment do you use to make your YouTube videos? Camera, computer, editing programs, etc. So, hold on 1 second. So, over the years, I've used a couple different options for cameras, but this is a Canon G7X, and I find it makes pretty high quality videos. It's also just the size of a point and shoot camera. Some people walk around with those huge cameras. Personally, not my thing. This does good enough quality for any of the videos that I need to shoot. Though admittedly, if I was trying to make a certain type of artistic video or photos, that this probably wouldn't do it. But if you're just starting out, it's reasonably cost. It's a couple $100. I actually bought mine refurbished, so I got it a lot cheaper than new. But it's a good choice. I also have a tripod. I also have a lavalier microphone, which I pin onto me, and with the other end plugs into my phone, so I can get good quality audio. And in terms of editing, I use Final Cut Pro on my Mac, and that works really well. It's pretty easy to learn, and yeah. Let's see, what did I cover? Yeah, so if you have more questions about the equipment I use, you can ask me below. I've been vegetarian for about 7 years prior to this event, but all this knowledge is being thrown at me definitely gives me a kick to finally go vegan. Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part, because there's basically two types of moral people. One is the people who know this stuff and are either in the process of transitioning to veganism or are vegan, or there's the people who know it and kind of decide to go la 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 la, you know, and just try to ignore the facts. And then there's the people who are just ignorant of the facts. So you can kind of decide like how you can stick your head in the sand and not think about this stuff. And you can avoid the implications for a while, but eventually the discordance between your values and what you know is going to get hard enough to like kick you in the right direction. So yeah, I would say knowledge is incredibly powerful in that way if you're actually willing to think about it. A lot of people are willing to just compartmentalize what they're doing and not think about it, which, you know, is kind of a way of escaping. How did I get into acro yoga? Oh man, guys, physical play is kind of like my cup of tea. If you want to go on Instagram, if any of you guys are on Instagram, or even my Facebook page, I put up a lot of my partner acrobatics videos, and it's just like, it's the most fun thing ever, because you get to connect with this person and become intimate with them, not in a sexual way, but just in a touch-based way and a connection in a trust-based way. It's an amazing way to make friends and theoretically to, you know, build a romantic relationship as well, I've found, if you decide to take it in that direction. But in terms of how I got into it, I had a roommate, Katie Crane, years ago, who took me to this Friday night jam here in Austin. I live in Austin, Texas. And she was like, yeah, you put people on your feet, and it's fun. And I was like, but I went and I really liked it, but I didn't get into it for a while. It was kind of hard to explain why not, because I liked it immediately, but I didn't really have a way of practicing regularly. I didn't have a partner or anything like that. And I did take some classes and I kind of got into it, but I just kind of then traveled. Essentially, that was probably the main thing. I would have kept getting into it more, but I ended up leaving Austin for a while to take care of some stuff. And then I met my ex-girlfriend at the time, and we basically did acro all the time, like almost every day, and we started to get really good at it. We're no longer together. I still do acro with her occasionally, but I've gotten good enough, so I'm a very good teacher now. So I teach a lot of people. I host jams. I go to other people's jams, and it's a really fulfilling thing for me. It's one of my favorite things in life, honestly, doing acro. So if you want, you can look me up on Instagram, some of the cool acro that I do. Renaissance Humans is my name over there, or just search Andrew Perlot. How do you get extrinsic motivation to become intrinsic? That is a very good question, because a lot of the things I talked about before, the knowledge about animal suffering, the knowledge about environmentalism and how animal agriculture is degrading our environment, and the knowledge that your health is suffering because of the choice to eat animal products. So how do you actually internalize that enough to make it stick? And I think that there's really kind of different ways that you can go about that. One is that if you don't have a journaling tradition, or like just, journaling or meditation, I think that all of these things can help remove that separation between the knowledge and it actually being inside of you. So in different ways. So awareness is basically being present in the moment. And so when you stare in the face of a steak and you say, what is this, what I'm eating, you can distract yourself away from what you're doing. But if you really stop and concentrate on it and think about what you're doing, it's kind of hard to avoid that knowledge of what you're putting in your body. And journaling, maybe every day, spending 10 minutes just journaling about what's important to you in life and mentioning things like that you're grateful for, and talking about, yeah, I didn't hurt anyone today. I didn't cause suffering. I didn't destroy the planet a little bit more. These things can really make a difference. The other thing is that there's basically two factors that you can think of, multipliers of each other. So one is knowledge. The other one is, you might call it need or a drive. So you can play around with those. So if you hear tonight from me that, there's a lot of science showing that animal products will cause heart disease. If you learn that tonight and then you never think about it again, it's not going to be really driven home. But if you're continuously reading books on the subject of nutrition, reading studies, maybe tuning into my YouTube page where I talk about this stuff a lot, or some of my articles and talk about different elements of health, different elements of this stuff, it'll be renewed in your mind and it's harder to forget, and it kind of is like leveling up. So you can think of like knowledge as 1 to 10 and drive as 1 to 10. And the drive element is what you personally need. So if you're in ill health because you've been eating poorly, eating processed foods, eating animal products, then you've got more impetus to do this than someone who's in perfect health. And someone who has a lot of knowledge has more impetus because they understand the ramifications of what they're doing than someone who has very little knowledge, or maybe heard something once but it didn't really sink in. So those multipliers, you can take someone who knows a lot but doesn't have a lot of reason, or someone who has a lot of reason but doesn't know a lot, and they can kind of make up for each other. But it makes more sense to up your game in both those areas by finding ways to have the need element intact. So maybe you're going to start being more athletic and it's going to drive your athletic performance. Maybe you are going to start reading a chapter every night of some book on nutrition, and you're going to realize, oh man, that's really disturbing what I'm doing to my arteries. I would say, yeah, so think about that multiplier, hit both areas, and it's going to be more important to you. I love eating raw foods, but my family cooks like rice and stuff, and I get crazy cravings. What do you do for cooked food cravings? Well, I would say that usually cravings are a result of not having consumed enough calories from fruit, or just not enough calories in general. And also making sure that you're eating delicious salads every night. A big mistake is people aren't eating enough volume of leafy green vegetables, and maybe not having like a really cool salad dressing to put on that. So I would say, eat a pound of leafy greens every night is a good way for the saltiness and the mineral content's really going to be satiating. And then, yeah, when you see that they've made rice, well, you break out the meal of, grapes and follow up with your second course of salad. And when you've eaten a large meal like that and you've eaten enough calories, I think the cravings are going to be a lot less or non-existent. In the past, when I've had coaching clients who have struggled with this, I've told them about the 1 hour and 6 banana rule. So that is that if they feel the urge to go and eat something that they know they really shouldn't, then they have to first do something before they can consider that. And that is 1, eat 6 bananas, which will give them a large amount of calories. And 2, they have to take out a journal and spend at least 15 minutes writing about the things they're grateful for that day and why specifically they're eating a raw diet to remind themselves. And very often by the time when that hour is up, they very often don't have a desire because they've addressed the 2 aspects that really cause it. One is not eating enough. They've now just taken in a bunch of calories. They've probably got more fuel on hand and they're not craving things anymore. And 2 is that they've just spent a lot of time being grateful and kind of getting out of their head about, I miss this cooked food. So that can be really a good approach. Can you talk a little bit about the science behind why cooked food isn't the healthiest for our bodies? So there's a number of aspects. A lot of people will tell you that it's the heat, it's the cooking that destroys the food. I actually find that a less compelling reason myself. However, there is a good body of evidence, for instance, vitamin C, something that we eat a lot of, is actually destroyed by the cooking process. There are a wide variety of nutrients that are destroyed or degraded by the cooking process. So essentially, when you cook food, there's in some cases less of it on hand for your body to use. But I actually think that is the lesser reason, and one that I find less compelling. I would say that the main reason for me is because of the foods that you can eat cooked. So this is particularly true for those who have issues, intestinal diseases like colitis, like I had. I deal with a lot of coaching clients who have these issues, and very often it's the fact that, it's the grains and the starches and the beans and the nuts, in some cases the nuts and the seeds, that all are very high in lectins, which are a type of protein that basically binds with carbohydrate and cause some serious gut damage, can cause serious digestive problems. So I would kind of look at it from that perspective. What are you doing to your body when you eat these things? No question, a cooked vegan diet is gonna be better than a junk food diet or a diet that contains animal products. So certainly, if that's the best you can do, you should do that. But I think you should seriously spend some time investigating how you feel with a 100% raw diet. Give it 60 days to really sink in. And I think you will likely find that you don't need even facts to describe it. You'll just have better energy. You'll just feel better. You'll find maintaining your weight where you want it is easier. And, I used to be obese, and I like the fact that I need to give less effort to weight management than I really had to because of that. So that would be my advice. Okay. Anyone else got any questions about veganism, about minimalism, about financial independence, about running your own business? Anyone else have anything for me? All right, it looks like maybe we have no more questions. How do you start your own online business? So how do you start your own online business? It's kind of like, there's a million ways, so there's no way that I give you the definitive way to do it. But how did I start my own online business? So I was working full-time as a newspaper reporter at the time in 2008 when I started my initial website. Now, the internet was at a different period back then, so it's not as though, it's definitely you would take the exact same steps as I did. But basically, I started noticing that so many people were interested in me having beaten my colitis. And so I started talking about my strategy of using raw foods to do it. And I started writing articles in search engines, then index those because I was smart about how I did it. I did it through Site Build It, which is, you'll find the link in that free document that I gave you. That will, it's basically a online business building guide that you can approach from different ways. So over the years, once I got a lot of traffic coming to my website, I started an email list, and so I would give away some free stuff. They'd give me their email addresses, and then I'd be in communication with them that way and kind of remind them of what I was working on. I've written a number of books, which I then sell to people who come to my website or through and that was pretty much my main income for years. More recently, I've split out and been doing more stuff with YouTube. I've also done some non-health related stuff that I don't really promote through my business, fiction writing and nonfiction writing. But all of it's kind of under the umbrella of stuff I do online and don't need a job to do. So I would say most of my income comes from book sales. I also do YouTube sales through ads through YouTube. And I do some coaching, but most of it's book sales. And I also get some donations for things like my podcast. Brianna says, yes, I definitely noticed feeling much better on raw. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's kind of what you have to go with. Does this make you feel better, honestly? Because, yeah. I mean, it's not as if there's a great body of science investigating raw food diets versus cooked vegan diets. I wish there was, because I think it would be some fascinating things to look at, like autoimmune response to cooked food versus raw food and things like that, starch versus sugar. There's some fascinating information about how starch can actually get in your bloodstream versus, not really so much with sugar. Okay, Dylan writes, what is your favorite book? Well, I'm a huge reader of fiction, so I don't think that's what you're talking about. Maybe nonfiction you're talking about. So favorite book, it's nonfiction. So I would say that the books that really changed my life and had an impact on me was Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. Really, when I read that in college, changed what I wanted to do with my life. Because I immediately, after I read that book, wanted to go traveling. And I thought, as soon as I get out of college, I'm going to go traveling for a few years. But I got a job offer and before I graduated, and I thought, it's the responsible thing to do. Excuse me. Maybe I'll just get a job and not do the traveling. And I ended up it was so part of me because of that book that I was just chafing. I wanted to go. And so finally in 2010, I quit my job and I decided to make a go at making my business a full-time gig. And I moved to Southeast Asia and traveled around there for 2 years. And over the years, I've keep traveling. I come back to the US, I'll live for a while and maybe go away for the winter or something and come back. So travel and exploring different parts of the world is definitely a part of me and something I really love. And vagabonding has really helped with that. Years ago, also in college, I read Your Money or Your Life, which also helped put in perspective the need for minimalism and generating freedom. The investment advice in that book is kind of outdated, but the underlying principle of minimalism is still really up to date. But I would, if you're actually wanting to do it in the modern world, I would say you probably want more. You probably want some more of the books that I listed in that free document I gave you. Ebooks. Are you asking me if I wrote ebooks or if I read ebooks? I'm not sure what the question is. Oh, well, the format I write for is, all of them are at least ebooks, but some of them are in print as well. I ship my books from a print-on-demand company. It's pretty cool setup because if I wanted to, I could pay a large sum of money for a printing company to print a bunch of my books and then hire someone to store them in a warehouse and then send them out bit by bit. but you don't have to have that upfront investment if you use these print-on-demand companies. So someone buys a print copy of my book in Germany or Australia or Japan, China, all over the world. People have, like, the weirdest places that you've never even heard of, people have bought my print books. And so I just enter in the information, they print out one copy and they send it away. And so it's not as profitable as paying for a large lump sum order, but I definitely have print books because there's still a large demand for them. But ebooks are definitely a bigger seller than print books. What would you say are the top few pitfalls you may run into when starting a vegan lifestyle, and how do you avoid them, deal with them? I would say there's a real issue with angry vegan syndrome. So what I mean by that is a lot of new vegans seem to get really angry at everyone else because they're not vegan. And if you are among, there's a saying like there's hell hath no fury, like the, newly converted. That's usually applied to religion, but dogma like veganism can also kind of create the same effect. So I would say that when you're interacting with people, if you want to positively influence them to go vegan, remember that no one thinks of themselves as a bad person. No one thinks of themselves as the villain in their own story. Everyone is the hero in their own story. So when you go about implying that they are villainous for their dietary choices, you've more or less already lost the discussion because they think that's ridiculous. I'm not a villain. Maybe you'll get through to a few of them, but I don't think that's the right way. What I would prefer, what has worked better for me is when interacting with the world to make sure you think about people as heroes on their own journey. Joseph Campbell famously wrote about the hero's journey. It's a mythological underlining for most of the stories that can be found in human myth, but it's very much applicable to all human life. We kind of see ourselves as this journey. So if you can kind of explain to someone and lay out a path that by going vegan, by staying vegan, by doing this, that it's kind of an evolutionary thing for them where they're getting better, they're on their own hero's journey, then I think you will have a lot more luck. You will inspire a lot more people, and you will avoid a lot more of those conversations like I was kind of talking about before, where people are, saying you're ridiculous, it's disgusting, or whatever ridiculousness they may want to say to you. If you kind of deal with them in a better way, you're going to have more success. What site do you use for printing your books, and are your books on your website? Also, what's your website? The site I use for printing my books is called createspace.com, and it's a subsidiary of Amazon, and you can kind of you can upload your book files and they just print them out. Pretty cool. Are your books on your website? Yes, I have two websites. One is raw-food-health.net. You'll find all my raw food books there. My other website, it's a newer creation, it's called renaissancehumans.com. And those are not don't have any raw food books up there at the moment. But you can find all my raw food books on rawfoodhealth.net with hyphens in between the words. When minimizing, how do you decide what to keep and what to give away? I've started my minimalist journey and it feels awesome, but I'm hitting a bit of a plateau with the harder stuff. So, Brianna, I would say that minimalism is a tool. So a lot of people pursue minimalism with the idea that their life is going to keep getting better as long as they keep minimizing. And maybe for some people, that's actually the truth. Like if I get down to 100 possessions, then suddenly my life will be better than when I had 110 possessions. But I actually think that that's kind of a weird way to look at it, because I've gotten the most value from looking at it like, what am I putting into owning this possession? So for instance, take a car. That car needs to be bought for initially, and maybe you're paying for it because you took out a loan maybe to pay for it. So you're doing that over the course of many years. You then need to find a place to park that car. In many cases, if you live in a city, you then need to pay to maintain that car. You have to fuel up that car, and you have to protect it from things. Versus, well, a bike is a lot easier to care for and it's a lot cheaper. So, you have to look at the cost benefit of having that car or just having a bike, and then think about other things like, well, in some areas, it'll be easier to not own a car. If you live in a significantly sized city, New York City, Boston, Austin is not even a big city, but basically an actual city as opposed to a suburb, it's going to be a lot easier to survive without that car. In terms of clothing, you want, if you consistently are not wearing the clothing that you own, you probably can safely get rid of it. Phones, I went many years without. I think it's fine to go without, but a lot of people, are really into their phones. It's all item by item analysis. So if you look around my apartment, it's not super decked out with stuff. I've got some furniture, but it's enough to support the things that I actually care about. It's not decorated for the sake of decorating. It's not, the beautiful things that I have are there because I find them beautiful, not because I have an empty space that I feel like I'm obligated to fill. So look at it. Will the removal of this item actually bring benefit to my life? I think that's the super important question. As I shed stuff, like things like, I used to have a huge book collection, but then I got rid of it and I replaced it with ebooks. And I can't say the number of times that I've missed a print book have been very small. So if you have a more specific question regarding that, I'm perfectly willing to answer it. I don't know if I did a good enough job answering it, but if you want to ask me about specific items, like what exactly you mean by the harder stuff, I'm happy to talk about that if you want to just respond below. What produces less mucus in the human body? A meal of raw, high fat, such as avocados, or low fat steamed squash and steamed potatoes. So there's no published research on this subject. So whatever you hear is going to be somebody's opinion. Personally, I find that the source of the fat is going to matter dramatically to answer that question. So if nuts and seeds, for me, I usually find that when I eat those, I'll have more of a mucousy reaction than if I just eat an avocado, for instance. But something like rice or most grain products or beans tend to generate more than, certainly fruit of all kinds. So it really varies. I don't know that mucus is really the factor that I would say is like most important in making health decisions. All right. Do we have anyone else with a question? And remember, you can ask me about a wide variety of stuff. I'm open to answering whatever you've got. All right. So, any tips on helping a significant other transition to not eating animal products? I would say that my answer to that is highly similar to what I was talking about with, advice for people going in. And when you're interacting with your significant other, it's just like interacting with any member of the general population. Don't shame them, and instead lay it out as like a hero's journey. Look, this is the path where you are, and this is like a path that you're on to discover that veganism is better. And so don't shame them. Don't be like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you see this? Don't be like, whatever. Instead, just start sharing with them wonderful food. I mean, if your meal is a huge watermelon rather than a steak, who can resist biting into a huge thing of watermelon, not feeling satiated and good afterwards? Share them the good things with your diet. Share them the wonderful things that make your life better. Share them how good you feel because of what you do, and don't shame them. And I think that the biggest thing that you can do is to show people how it's improved you. So, if you're, you lose weight, you have more energy, you get less sick, and these things really show through. You think people are, when you're really thriving, people notice. They are watching you, they're admiring you, And it's the same thing with your significant other. When they're, you know, less healthy than they could be, when they're more overweight than they could be, when they're just not doing as well as you, you know, the diet, they're going to notice that you're doing really well, and that kind of thing will help them move along. All right. So yeah, let's see. It's been a 3-year struggle, and his answer are consistently, I like meat. So not sure how to respond to that. Yeah. Is there a way that you can talk about that, not from take it beyond the question of taste? Because ultimately you can find things that taste good on any diet. You can replace meat with fake vegan meats, but most flavor comes from vegetable-based flavoring agents. So is there any way that you could just kind of push it that way? Like, you know, hey, this is good food. Do you need the meat? And also just remind him about the health implications. Is it cool with him that he's giving himself heart disease? And like, you know, when you ask him about that, what is his response? Is it, I don't believe you? Because if the answer is, I don't believe you, that can be very easily remedied by, you know, showing them studies, by having discussions about that. You can show them videos. I mean, someone suggests make him read the China study. Yeah, I mean, certainly that if you can actually get him to read it and not shove it down his throat so it's a way that he resents, then yeah, I think it can be done. And the question really is, do you care enough about this subject to let it ruin an otherwise good relationship? I think that's a really important question. Because do you really love this guy unconditionally? Is he exactly what you want, and it's just like the meat's really pissing you off? You know, I've dated people who are vegan and raw foodists and non-vegan, and there's some rules, like I don't eat any meat inside my, I don't let any meat, dairy, or eggs inside my home. But other than that, like, I don't think that they're bad people because they've been doing these things. In almost all the cases, they've ended up eating a lot more like me, whether or not they've totally given up meat. In many cases, they've gone vegan or nearly vegan because of the influence I've had on them. So I just think time and, you know, honest discussion goes a long way. I think looking at the science is an honest discussion, because what is he going to say? Are you okay with having a partner that is very more prone to having cancer or heart disease or diabetes than someone who didn't eat meat? You know, what is he going to respond to that? Why are you doing this to yourself? I think that's an important question. So, yeah. All right, we're 57 minutes in. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, I guess we're wrapping up. You're very welcome, Vegan World Summit. All right, I think we're going to wrap that up now. So thanks you're welcome for your help. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I hope you have a fantastic Saturday.